Yeah, thank you, Shelley. I'm the former chair that did not nearly become Prime Minister. There may be time yet, but I think if we're looking for chairs to become Prime Ministers, our hopes now rest on Shelley at some point in the future. I can already tell this is a much better meeting than the one 20 years ago at which Stop the War was founded, which was one of the most acrimonious and disputatious meetings I've ever attended, and I think Lindsay at the time did brilliantly to hold that meeting together. And I would actually just like to start by paying a personal tribute to Lindsay German for the fantastic work she's done over 20 years. And I'm very proud to have worked alongside her in the Stop the War Coalition. Now, you could boil down our record over the last 20 years into 3 words. We were right. Everything that we said 20 years ago, and most of what we've said since, has been borne out by events, and that has been dramatically highlighted by what's just happened in Afghanistan. We were right about Afghanistan when we said that the terrorist attacks of 9/11 should be treated as a crime, not an act of war, and when we said that occupying Afghanistan would lead to disaster. We are right, and it's been shown that that war of intervention has been the longest and bloodiest way to get from point A back to point A again. 20 years, tens of thousands of lost lives, a country destroyed, and a region destabilised. We were right, and it's brought home to me why we were right in a little article in the Wall Street Journal, of all places, in the last few weeks in the aftermath of this calamity in Afghanistan, where a journalist said that in 2002, 2003, the newly installed Afghan government wanted to open peace talks with the Taliban to get an inclusive and united government. They were vetoed by the Americans. Vetoed. And that shows that this was imperialist power denying the sovereignty of an Afghan government that they had themselves more or less installed to seek a peaceful solution to that country's problems. And the subsequent destruction and bloodshed is on the hands of the American and the British governments above all, and we were right to oppose them. We were right, of course, about Iraq as well. I don't think I need to dwell on that point particularly, but I would just like to emphasise how Stop the War, we had to take a decision, because some people in the peace movement around the world, they were against the war in Iraq, but once the war was over and it's settling down to occupation, they all said, let's make the best of it. Let's get behind the occupation. We said, you cannot oppose the crime and then support its consequences. We oppose the occupation, and it's the occupation of Iraq as much as the original war that wrecked and destroyed that country. So we were right about Iraq, and we have been vindicated by everything that has happened since. We were right. We were right about Libya. We didn't have hundreds of thousands of people on the streets protesting against the war in Libya, but we did warn in a pamphlet, I think I wrote it with Chris Nineham as far as I remember, saying a war on Libya will risk tearing that country apart. And of course it has done, and we've seen the consequences in terms of the massive suffering in Libya, the migrant crisis in the Mediterranean, and more. We were right in the calls that we have made, the critical decisions in the last 20 years. And frankly, world politics would have been much better if Stop the War Coalition, rather than the Labour and Tory governments, had been directing the foreign policy of this country, and we should not be ashamed to say that. And we were right not because of any alchemy, or because our opponents are necessarily stupid people, when they went all George Bush, but we were right because we said that the peaceful solution of disputes and an outlook informed by anti-imperialism is a better guide to solving the problems of the world than the doctrines of interventionism, of great power politics, and of the supremacy of Britain and the United States of America. It was that outlook which has been vindicated. Now, there's a nincompoop called Wayne David, who's a Labour MP. He's actually been appointed by Keir Starmer shadow minister for the Middle East and North Africa. Now, this man, Wayne David, he supported the Iraq War, he supported the Libyan intervention, he supported the Afghan War. So basically, he's been put in, if he became minister, I don't know what the countries in the Middle East and North Africa are supposed to make of him, because he's in favour, basically, of invading and overthrowing all their governments whenever he wants. Anyway, I'm not making that particular point. My point is, he said recently that the Labour Party must drop its obsession with anti-imperialism. Now, you will find no one around the world who believes that the main problem with the Labour Party has been its obsession with anti-imperialism. It's been the obsession with imperialism of Tony Blair to Wayne David and Keir Starmer that is going to undermine the Labour Party's future, and we are right to fight against it. Now, dwelling for a moment on nincompoops, there's been a massive amount of criticism of Stop the War over the last 20 years, and that's fine, that goes with the turf. But I was researching something else the other day when I came across what I still think is the most priceless attack on Stop the War in these 20 years, and it was delivered by Martin Kettle, one of the college of constipated centrists that stopped the Guardian's comment pages. And he said back in 2006, the anti-war movement was right about the war, but wrong about everything else. Well, it's a bit like saying the Beatles were all right at music, but hopeless at putting out fires. I mean, but the fact is that not only was the anti-war movement right about the war, which is actually our raison d'etre, we weren't there to address any other particular problems, we were actually right about other things as well. We were right to say that this course of war would pollute our own society, that it would lead to an increase in racism and Islamophobia, that it would menace civil liberties, and that is what has happened in our country and in many other countries across the world, and putting opposition to a racist backlash that has primarily been borne by Muslims in this country was, again, absolutely the right thing to do, whether The Guardian acknowledges it or not. Now, we can be proud, too, of the movement that we built around these principles. And I'd just like to just spend a second on it. I mean, firstly, Stop the War Coalition united the left. Not easy. Never easy. And let's remember, I mean, even a couple of years before we were founded, when there was the attack on Yugoslavia, the left was all over the place, basically, on that war. I'm not going to go down that particular issue now, but uniting the left around basic, clear principles of support for peace, opposition to war, opposition to racism, and defence of civil liberties, that was key. We also had the support initially of a small number of smaller militant trade unions, but then in the end, virtually the entire trade union movement, and that was a strength. We can be proud of the support we had from school students around the country who walked out from school against war, giving the lie to the idea they were an apathetic generation, and many of those school students I now bump into in other contexts, much older now, playing a part in politics. I am particularly proud of our association with the Muslim community, with individual Muslim leaders like Salma Yaqub, who's speaking later, with the Muslim Association of Britain in particular as an organisation. We helped build a fighting alliance of the left, of many communities, with British Muslims for the first time. And again, I was proud, and actually I was told by a special branch officer, if you must know, we didn't go into all the circumstances, when he actually said, and he worked this, that what we had done more for community relations in this country with building alliances with the Muslim community than any government programme. And this was back before print. So we can be proud of that too. We can be proud of the Military Families Alliance, where we were able to build unity with the parents of those who had lost their sons in Iraq and Afghanistan and who found the courage to say they died for a false cause. And we built that alliance, and that was something entirely unprecedented that, again, I think will resonate and certainly rattled the establishment. And I'm also proud that we did not run away from the Iraqi people in particular when they were resisting the illegal occupation. You may remember, or some of you may, I think it was 2006, we held a conference with political representatives of the Iraqi resistance there. And it is right that we did so, because we have to stand in solidarity with people who are campaigning and working against the criminal policies of our government being carried out in their country, and that, again, is something of great significance that we did that. So I'm proud of our record, but we also have to look to the future, and much of today's programme, I believe, will be doing that. We said, right 20 years ago, the wars we have been dragged into now are only the foothills of greater conflicts. And when we look at what was announced this week in terms of the, I'm not going to try and pronounce the acronym, but it's called MERD in French, this alliance of Australia, the UK and the US, new Cold War arms race in the Far East directed against China. We are now seeing existing imperialist alliances breaking up or threatened, new ones being formed, and the dangers of still greater wars. Not perhaps the war on terror type interventions, but worse wars. And we will have to fight, campaign in new ways, in alliances with a new range of people to discharge our mandate of stopping the war. And these are vital for the future of our country and our politics. We had, as Shelley alluded to it, a tremendous achievement, and one of Stop the War's longest-standing supporters became leader of the Labour Party. Things are now going into reverse there. But I do say this, if the Labour Party abandons the politics of peace and justice and wraps itself in the flag, if it turns its back on the sort of forces that Stop the War coalition mobilised, then the Labour Party will have no future as a progressive force in this country. Now, comrades, just to conclude, there are obviously many things I look back on and think we could have done better, we should have done better, and many things that we take pride in. I particularly remember an occasion, I think it was after the peak of the war in Iraq, when we were still holding very large demonstrations. They were very large by any standards other than the previous demonstrations we'd organised. And after one of them, we got messages from people in Iraq saying they'd seen our demonstration on television and how heartened they were to know that there were tens and hundreds of thousands of people in Britain demonstrating against the war and the occupation that was ravaging their country. And that, I think, is our achievement. I don't want to end on a hyperbolic note, but I just want to say that I think what we have done is we have planted the standard of opposition to war and opposition to imperialism. We have rallied hundreds of thousands and millions of people to it here in the heartland of one of the oldest and bloodiest empires in the world. And in doing that, I think we've made a decent contribution to the future of humanity.
Thank you so much.